Good morning, everyone. We are excited to have you here today for this webinar, this exciting webinar. So thank you. Welcome to iCrossing's Thought Leadership webinar about accelerating the AI-powered future of customer experiences. We are very happy to join with us, that you are able to join with us for this insightful succession. We've got Eric Pilkington from iCrossing, who leads our head of business solutions and transformation strategy. Good morning, Eric.
Morning.
And we're also featuring a special guest today, David Truog from Forrester, who really is a true expert in the realm of emerging technologies and customer experience innovation. So that is our fabulous panel today. I am Lori Wilson, and I am simply here to serve as the host to let these amazing gentlemen do their thing. I actually lead the experience design and content practice here at iCrossing, and I'll sort of serve as your moderator for today's interactive discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speakers. They really bring decades of experience and insight around pragmatic solutions around AI to create tangible business results and personalized experiences at scale. So our hope is that you walk away from this, but not only just learning a bit more about what AI is doing to change the industry, but also get some tangible and pragmatic use cases and ideas for where it can help your business. So first we have Eric, who is an amazing leader here at iCrossing. He brings 20 years of experience in driving growth initiatives and shaping the future of consulting practices. So Eric, we're super happy to have you on our team and happy to have you on the panel today. He's really been at the forefront of digital transformation and emerging technologies for quite some time, and is really helping our clients today navigate the complexities of the digital landscape and stay ahead and remain competitive. So he'll bring some really interesting thoughts to the table. And then David Truog, who, David, we're thrilled to have you with us today. And I could go on for a whole hour about David's background, a really recognized leader at Forrester. And he's been researching these cutting edge innovations and at the intersection of technology and design for quite some time. He has an impressive academic background that he's bringing to the table, and really was at the forefront of predicting the rise of neural networks, and has really become a central force in the AI industry. So I want to just give you a couple quick things. We will have a question and answer period at the end, so please feel free to use that feature. You may see Maddie Gatewood in the background, who's helping us with some technology portions. So if you have any issues, reach out to Maddie in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric and David to get started, and just remind all of you also that if you have any questions, you can always reach us at iCrossing.com or reach out to us on email via hello@icrossing.com. So thank you. Let's get started. And Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Laurie. Thanks for that kind and warm introduction. Welcome, everyone, and welcome, David.
Thanks, Eric. Delighted to be here. This is a really fascinating and important topic, especially after the long AI winter we've had, and finally there's some growth.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm super excited to be having this conversation with you. Full disclosure to the audience, I was sort of hit with the flu yesterday, so I'm joining you from my hotel here in Chicago, which is not ideal, but as they say, the show must go on. So I will do my best really to stifle my cough, and if you see me taking excessive sips of water, you know why. But maybe with that said, let's jump into it. So, before we dive deeper into the current landscape, David, I'd really like to take a moment to reflect on the history of AI. Many talk about AI as a new technology that's really taken the world by storm, but truth be told, right, the technology's been around for over 70 years. It's been more than a decade and a half since Watson appeared on Jeopardy. And of course, maybe as you alluded to in your opening comments, right, we've all witnessed sort of the ups and downs of AI over the course of many years. So maybe we could just start by just sharing your perspectives on that history and in your opinion, right, what's different this time around in what I often refer to as AI 3.0?
Sure, yeah. I think that's right. Early efforts in AI were really about what's sometimes referred to as rule-based AI, sometimes called GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. And the notion was that somehow human intelligence could be represented as a set of rules, like if-then statements. And that's true in certain narrow domains. So there was some success in the 80s around things called expert systems for doing very narrow tasks like diagnosing blood diseases and capturing the knowledge of physicians in a series of if-then statements. But very, very narrow, not really what we would call intelligence in any more generally applicable way. And in parallel, there was this effort that is sometimes referred to as neuromorphic AI. In other words, AI that's shaped a little bit more like the nervous system, like a brain, not rules-based, and that gave rise to what is now known as machine learning. Those ideas have been around for decades, but one of the things that has really helped them take off has been not just sort of the refinement of the technologies behind neural networks, but the fact that now there's massive quantities of data available to train those networks. And that's one of the characteristics of those systems is that they learn. They learn from being exposed to massive quantities of data. And in the case of what we've seen, most recently, for example, ChatGPT, that massive quantity of data is a snapshot of the entire web. For the original ChatGPT, that was 500 billion tokens. A token is basically a word. That's a lot. That's a lot of data. So that's made all the difference in making it really, really pick up steam.
Yeah, and I guess for me, this is really where I see AI moving from this theoretical concept to a practical tool. The introduction of incredible compute power, and as you alluded to, the vast amounts of data have really enabled these algorithms, if you will, to learn in ways that certainly I never thought possible. And it's, I think important maybe to highlight that today's AI solutions are not just about crunching numbers or even surfacing content, but they're increasingly focused on understanding human behavior, emotions, and even intent. Can you maybe comment on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a reason they're called large language models and not large number models. And they're trained mostly on language. And that language is text that's human created content. Now, because it's human created, that means that it's not always accurate. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes not. Sometimes it's wise and insightful. Sometimes it's toxic and harmful. Sometimes reasonable people can disagree about whether it's one or the other. But there's a ton of it. So linguistically, it's very helpful. But in terms of what is, true or false or biased or unbiased, there are risks there. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important when using AI to try to think about how to use it responsibly and ethically. There's sometimes this mistaken notion that generative AI is biased. It is not. It's the content that we sometimes use to train it that can be biased. But saying Gen AI is biased is kind of like saying, oh, I opened an Excel spreadsheet and pasted in 10 rows of biased statements, therefore Excel is biased. No, it's not. It's the human created content that's biased. So yes, we do have to be extremely careful because the consequences can be disastrous. But it's really a matter of being really careful about the quality of the data that we use for training these systems. And also, I'd say that, it's not just about automating tasks, which is often what it's described as helping with. It certainly can help with that. But it's also about making the experiences, the digital experiences that we deliver to customers and employees and other users more human-like because of the amazing kind of fluidity, linguistic fluidity that you get when you're using generative AI in conversational experiences. Does that make sense?
It does, and maybe to play on that last point. I mean, as you know, David, well, I'm a bit of a CX purist, and we hear a lot about AI's potential in customer experiences. But from your research, right, how close are we, really to these near human interactions that you're describing? Are companies overestimating the readiness of these technologies, or is that future, maybe closer than we think it is?
I'd say there are some technology readiness issues. There's also a question of, what are companies doing? Are they applying best practices for using these technologies? So looking at conversational AI in particular, some of what Forrester's data shows, I think, is quite revealing, which is that 71% of companies worldwide have created chatbots and deployed them and implemented them in some form to some degree of maturity. That's 71%. And then if you look at well, are users actually turning to those chatbots for help? Well, 58% of the US online adults have tried, but only 16% are coming back frequently to use those chatbots. So that's interesting, right? 58, 16. That means clearly there's interest. In other words, offering ordinary language interfaces for users is a great idea, but they're disappointed by what they're getting right now, and only 16% are using them on a regular basis. So that does suggest that there's a mismatch between what companies are doing and the expectations and needs of users that requires, designing them better based on best practices, and also having a really much better understanding of the domain that the chatbot is trying to address, whether it's customer service or marketing or whatever it might be, and then fine-tuning it effectively so that it can actually address the needs of users.
And so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that it's really crucial to recognize that the quality of training data significantly affects AI performance. And if organizations enter with high expectations without a solid data strategy, they'll likely be disappointed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quality of that data is going to have a big impact on two things. One is the ability to recognize user intents, what users are actually trying to achieve. And second, the ability to respond to those intents with accurate information and effective actions that actually result in customer satisfaction that's high, which is what you want to achieve. So I would say that that's the one component is the quality of the data, and then the other is how you marshal that in the dialogues that you roll out to those customers. It used to be you had to do those in a very scripted way, structuring the dialogue, and now it's possible to do it using generative AI, again, if you have good data in a way that generates more fluid dialogue that actually sidesteps some of the risks that can be involved in the hallucinations that can arise from generative AI. So I'd say, there's a lot of complexity in the kinds of dialogues that users want to have, and the technology can handle that. But it means you need to have really good processes in place and good operational frameworks from a design perspective and a technology perspective.
That's a fantastic point. And maybe building on those last few points, I mean, I noticed personally that AI has become a bit of a panacea for a lot of organizations. It seems that, just about every company I talk to wants to jump in or jump on the AI bandwagon in some meaningful way, creating what at times feels like to me a bit of a red ocean of experimental and semi-baked solutions. And this has led to, incredible fragmentation, not unlike, frankly, what I saw, back in my early days at Watson in 2015 and 16. So how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, right now there are lots of providers really vying for attention, making very strong claims about their use of generative AI that are really at differing levels of maturity. In some cases, it's purely marketing claims, sort of a statement of intention. And in other cases, companies are actually rolling out real generative AI features, the technology providers in their products. But again, at various levels of maturity, sometimes in beta. I think there are two things that are revealing about the state of maturity. First of all, and this is what you should do, as a company, if you're considering working with one of these providers, ask for, proven implementations that show what the technology is capable of doing for existing customers, as opposed to purely marketing claims. And the other is making sure that when you roll out these technologies, you're really focusing on the quality of the dialogue design that you're applying to the implementation. The thing is that the providers that are creating these technologies and rolling them out right now are to some extent in a situation where they're offering a lot of features for free which is kind of itself an indication that a lot of these are kind of beta and not really certain yet, not always reliable. That's changing very, very quickly. But if you look at the announcements that have been made by various technology vendors, they've made it clear that in the next year or so, you will have to start paying. You will have to start paying more than what you're paying now for these generative AI features, which is often nothing. But it's not exactly clear when that's going to happen and how much. So there's some uncertainty there, which means you want to be really doing so judiciously so that you will have a return on investment when you roll these things out, and it goes from being more of a plaything to actually being a serious business proposition, which is going to happen quite soon.
So, in many ways, at least how I see it, this fragmentation has actually maybe complicated customer experience in a sense, at least based on what you just described. And with so many options, customers can be confused, sometimes frustrated by inconsistent platform experiences. So I would describe it as a double-edged sword, no?
Yeah, that's true. And as a result, I think that, it's really important for companies to take responsibility for the experiences they deploy. One of the mistakes I see sometimes is companies thinking, well, we'll just say this is an AI-powered experience. And then there might be some kind of a disclaimer or a description. But the problem with that is that users have very different mental models of what that means. Some people, when they see AI-powered, are going to think, oh, wow, that means it's infallible and it's going to be great and perfect because it's based in data. And others are going to say, doom and gloom, that's creepy, I'm not going to use it. And both are really false, I would say. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And so I think that it's incumbent upon companies using AI to not label the experience as powered by AI, but instead label it in terms of what its capabilities are and what its risks are. For example, if it's not always accurate, you need to say so in some form, as opposed to just saying that it's powered by AI. And you need to craft the dialogues so that your bot or whatever the conversational capability is not making assertions about, do this or do that. But for example, here are some possibilities you might consider, and here are pros and cons of each one. That's something that generative AI is very, very good at, and is in fact the way companies often train their advisors in high stakes industries like financial services and investing, for example. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And so, from a customer experience perspective, I believe, so much of this really needs to be use case driven. So, David, I guess the next question to you, maybe building off your previous comments, or what are your thoughts on why companies should focus on specific use cases when implementing AI solutions?
Well, I'd say it's because, the language and the kinds of problems that exist in each of those use cases in each of those domains is going to have quite a bit of variability. And when you identify kind of a sweet spot at the intersection of, what your customers actually need and what your company is able to do in a particular domain, you're going to be able to deliver better results. So, one example might be improving customer support. There, your goals might be quite different than if you're trying to personalize marketing efforts. In one situation, some companies have the goal of deflection. In the latter, sometimes the goal can be actually to increase engagement, which seems in some ways contradictory to deflection, but it's appropriate for different goals. So you're going to want to be using different fine tunings of the data, different ways of guiding, of steering those conversational interactions through modifying the context. So it's very important to identify what the use case is, which really means identifying what the business goal is prior to just jumping in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And my personal point of view is, by homing in on targeted use cases, businesses really can ensure that their AI implementations are practical, relevant, and actually enhance user experience, satisfaction, and even lead to greater degrees of customer or user loyalty. So maybe just switching gears a little bit, I'd love to talk about conversational and generative AI if we can.
Sure.
These technologies are focused and very much touted as transformative. But can you explain how businesses can use them today to achieve tangible results? And what are you seeing, or where are you seeing the most immediate impact in where these technologies are today?
Well, I think there's this big debate about, should I use generative AI or not for the conversational experiences? And some people saying, well, it's so, fluid, it comes across so much more in such a more human-like way. Absolutely, we should be all in with generative AI. And others saying, well, no, because it can hallucinate, so we should not. And there's some truth to both of those. I think the correct answer for almost every business is somewhere in the middle, which is really a hybrid solution where, yes, you should be using generative AI for its power, but in a way that's appropriate to the use case and even to the different parts of what having a conversational experience means. So, for example, one important thing is to identify what is the user trying to do? What is the user trying to achieve? The intent. That is something where generative AI can be very helpful, identifying the intent. But then the next step is to actually do something about that intent. Respond with information if it's a question, or by performing an action if it's a request for an action. That's where you may not want to be using generative AI. It depends on the use case. But for example, if it's about making a purchase, you don't want to be the company that sold a truck for $1, for example. That was a transaction that was very risky. On the other hand, the part of the dialogue that actually identified that you were interested in buying a truck, totally appropriate to use generative AI for that. So that would be a hybrid combination of using generative AI for the beginning of that process, and then actually using a highly scripted deterministic process and flow for the part that leads up to the purchase. So I think really combining the two can be really helpful. Customer support is one of those situations where chatbots can really help with common inquiries. And the
Sure.
goal there is not to get rid of the human agents, but let them handle the more complex issues, which can be good for costs, for the quality of service, and increasing customer satisfaction. And it's really valuable to make sure that you identify what the most common inquiries are. And there are all sorts of ways of doing that by looking at historical logs, call transcripts, which are, of course, long-form documents that can be challenging to analyze, but you can use generative AI to do that and extract some of those insights that result in understanding what are the intents that you need to be able to address. Does that make sense?
It does, and I love those examples, and not at all uncommon to a lot of the conversations we have with our customers every day, our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the barriers that you just sort of identified, and I think it's been highlighted often in a lot of your research, is that organizations do struggle with unstructured data. So in your mind, right, how do companies overcome that challenge of organizing and analyzing massive amounts of unstructured data, video, social content, call logs, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
to deliver these personalized experiences at scale that so many companies are after these days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think unstructured data is a really interesting topic because I would argue that unstructured is actually a misnomer for it because, in fact, typically it refers to, for example, natural language. And language is highly structured. It's just that it's a very deep and complex structure. What we typically call structured data, what we mean is simple structures like database rows with fields and data types. And language is in no way random. It has deep, deep, deep structure, and it's just much harder to analyze. And this is where neural networks are very effective because they essentially are doing probabilistic analysis of a much more complex domain, natural language. So what that means is that, yeah, when you have a large body of call transcripts from customer service calls, or for example, transcripts of 30 or 40 hours of user research interviews that you've done, in-depth qualitative user research interviews, that can be a challenge to understand and to extract any kind of insights from. And generative AI can really help with that because one of the things it's good at is summarization. Another is insights extraction. Now, it's not perfect. Don't expect it to be perfect. On the other hand, what would it mean to say a human was perfect at summarizing and extracting insights? 5 or 6 people in a room looking at the same document, summarizing it and extracting insights are going to have some disagreements. It's because it's not exactly a science, and yet there are some people who do it better than others. So it's important to look at the way it performs, the way Gen AI performs on these tasks, in a way that compares them to humans, as opposed to saying, are there any errors? That's kind of the wrong question to be asking. It's more like, is the overall quality satisfactory, comparable to what a human would deliver, especially given the much faster speed at which the results can be obtained. So that can be really, really valuable for learning about customer sentiment, learning about preferences, extracting insights that can lead to better content generation, for example, for personalization and all sorts of applications.
I think that's spot on. And, I think from experience, over the years, I don't think today is any different than it was 10 years ago. I think the need to persistently monitor and grade the value and to some degree the effect that these technologies and these interactions are having and persistently optimizing, I think that is absolutely important. And, albeit even still early days, right, with some human over the top, as you described it earlier. And maybe to that point, another challenge that I see is with pragmatic planning. So, many brands, as we talked about earlier, want to dive into AI, but really struggle to start correctly. So, what's your advice to companies on pragmatically planning their AI journey to ensure that they're not just experimenting, but seeing ROI and reasonable outcomes?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's important to start with a really clear strategy. And that strategy should be rooted in understanding your customers. I mean, that's one of Amazon's 16 leadership principles that are quite well known. I think it's the first one, and it's about starting with the customer, starting with understanding the customer, and going from there. So, how do you do that? You need to do the customer research, the user research, to get a really deep understanding of your customer needs. And then really set some specific goals for how AI can enhance your overall customer experience. Now, it may be difficult to express it in terms of ROI at this stage. That's fine. These don't need to be quantitative financial goals, but they do need to be specific goals about how will the experience be improved. Not just in terms of some beacon customer sat metric, but what will it do that will be different, that will satisfy customers in ways that you can identify and measure. Which is the other thing you need to do, is plan for how you're going to measure performance against those goals. And the measurement may not all be automatable. Just because you can't automate it doesn't mean you shouldn't measure it. Sometimes you need humans to do the more complex kind of measurements, not all, but some of them, and you don't want to ignore those. So I'd say those are the things that really are a foundation to make sure that you're really delivering value and not just playing around with the technology.
Yeah, so it's really, in my mind, about establishing frameworks that encourage agility and responsiveness, and maybe building on that a little bit. We've seen a lot of hype around AI, but what's the common misconception that companies have maybe when they're first starting to explore these solutions for customer experience more specifically?
I would say probably the biggest one is the notion that AI is sort of a silver bullet, that it can solve all the problems without human oversight, that you can get rid of the humans and let the AI take over. That's not true. That's sort of like essentially Gen AI can serve the function of a very smart, very quick junior employee who needs guidance. You wouldn't say in your company, let's just fire everyone and hire a bunch of people just out of college who are creative and smart, but with no experience. That wouldn't work. That doesn't mean you shouldn't hire those people. You should absolutely tap their effectiveness to have a productive team. So having humans in the loop who are overseeing and guiding what generative AI is doing is really, really crucial. On the other hand, you could also say you should have AI in the loop for humans that are trying to be effective. So it's hand in hand. I'd say AI plus humans is the best combination for really, really improving the quality of customer experiences.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I used to joke, back in the day when Watson was sort of hyped as magic in a box, or you plugged it in, you pressed a button, and voila, all of the world's problems were solved. Obviously, it doesn't work that way, and as we talked a bit about it, it does require a lot of data, a lot of analysis, and to some degree, actually to a large degree, right, still a lot of human intervention for sure. I guess as we're winding down, maybe on time, two more questions if you'll entertain me. From your research, I mean, how are you seeing companies effectively leverage technologies today, even beyond AI? So the integration of other technologies to kind of pull together more comprehensive forms of end-to-end experience. What are you seeing, sort of, feet on the street, from your perspective these days?
Well, I'd say that in some of my research a few months ago, I focused on sort of the human-like future of digital experiences, and the fact that there are many ways in which digital technologies are enabling experiences to become gradually more human-like. In other words, for a company's presence, digital presence, to feel more to end users, like they're interacting with humans at that company, which can be a very positive thing. But those technologies, including generative AI, conversational AI, adaptive AI, somatic interfaces, spatial interfaces, even virtual people are at various levels of maturity and also carry a bunch of risks if they're not implemented well, if they're not implemented with a human-centered design approach and based on evidence, really. When I advocate for design, sometimes people mistakenly think it means, well, just sort of instinct or taste and sort of an artist's approach. And of course, design does have an art component, but it has just as much of a science component. It's very interdisciplinary kind of approach. So taking a design approach actually means making decisions based on evidence, not just on gut and instinct, and iterating. In that sense, it has a lot in common with agile processes.
Sure.
But being iterative and converging on a way of really, really serving end customers with each of these technologies, as opposed to just, creating virtual people or a chatbot because it's cool and we have the technology. Doing it in a human-centric, customer-centric, user-centric way at the intersection between what people need and what your company can do, and what will actually be profitable and serve your company's mission as well as customers.
Absolutely. Maybe just to build on that last point, and this promise is my final question. We often celebrate AI and then in the advancements within it, but I do think it's really critical to acknowledge that customers' expectations today are sky high. We both know that they want seamless, immediate responses, and anything less feels like a failure. So, in my experience, clients are shocked when to realize when I talk to them about, how a clunky AI implementation, for example, could really erode customer trust and brand trust. So it's not just about having AI, but also about delivering experiences that meet or exceed those expectations. No?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is that, for example, imagine you have, a person in your contact center who one morning is in a bad mood, hasn't had enough coffee, and just starts saying some things that are negative and have a bad impact on the experience of some of your customers. Well, that's unfortunate, but you'd probably catch it after it happened in maybe 2 or 5 or 10 conversations. It would be clear something was wrong. On the other hand, if you have an AI agent that is going rogue in your contact center, it could impact, 10,000 customers in 1 minute, right? That's the power and the scalability of AI makes it powerfully effective in a positive way, but also potentially in a very negative way, which is why you do have to be really, really careful about how you monitor it carefully and also about the quality of the data that you use for training it. And keeping a human in the loop, as we've said multiple times, it's really, really important for being able to use it effectively at scale and side by side with human agents who are going to be delivering really good customer service.
Yeah, very well said. Could not agree more. And maybe, with that, I'd love to maybe open it up to some questions from the audience today, if you're open to it.
Sure, happy to.
Hey, this is Lori again, popping in to give you some questions coming in from the audience. First of all, guys, fabulous discussion. Super exciting to hear your pragmatic vision of AI, so thank you. The question on the table was, how can agencies and businesses effectively integrate AI technologies while considering their environmental implications? David, you're nodding, so we'll turn that one over to you.
Well, yeah, so I think by environmental implications, I think probably this audience member is alluding to the fact that the carbon footprint for the quantity of computation required with generative AI tends to be high. I mean, one common estimate is that if you compare a Google search to a prompt submitted to ChatGPT is 10 times as expensive as the Google search computationally. So that's a lot. That's a lot of juice when a lot of people are using the system at the same time. And that's part of the reason why, as I alluded to earlier, it's quite expensive and why companies are going to have to charge more because they have to pay for all of that. Now, I think that there are efforts underway to make these technologies more efficient, both in terms of the way the models are designed, the way the computation is done, where it's done, et cetera. But I think it's a big issue. I don't think we can escape and say, oh, well, let's just go for it. It is very computationally expensive. There is a big carbon footprint. And so like everything else, where we're using energy to accomplish something, It's a matter of weighing the cost and the benefit and mitigating those costs where we can. And our topic today isn't, mitigation of carbon footprint. There are many good sources about that, but I think that's crucial when you're using these technologies. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And, from my seat, a couple of thoughts. I think, the pressures that you're describing as part of the question, on technology companies today are real. I think at the end of the day, as with anything else, the costs, David, that you just described are also incredibly real and high. And so I think with the business impact or implications of that, I think will naturally force technologies and the companies that effectively power them to become more cost effective to run. Of course, greener technologies will continue to come online. And from an agency point of view, again, where we're able to, I think one of the things that we do often at iCrossing is, we're working with our clients to ensure that a lot of the technologies and a lot of the solutions that we're helping them to build and construct are using the greenest technologies available, and that we're, taking into account the fact that there are real environmental and other, factors weighing on these same companies to draw down their own carbon footprint. So, I think that the fact that none of us are ignorant to that point, nor are the companies that are sufficiently bringing these technologies online. So I do think it's just a matter of time before we start to get to a better sense of balance. But David, to your point, I think it's for now, it's about, weighing the pros and the cons and the implications of doing versus not doing.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have lots of excited people out here with lots of great questions. So one that just came in is, what are some AI use cases you've worked on recently that you felt were incredibly impactful?
It's a great question. Maybe I can start, and David, feel free to chime in if you know of any on your side. I mean, I think for me, the one that stands out, and I won't, name companies or brands, but I recently built a platform that used combinations of AI and blockchain effectively to open up and build more transparency into the supply chain for a major automotive OEM. And I think for me, the value of having done that is probably what stands out to me more so than the inner workings of that particular case study, if you will. But the AI running behind the scenes ultimately was not only enabling that transparency to be opened up more publicly, running on blockchain, but more importantly was able to provide real-time insights and perspective back to the OEM that enable them to draw down their carbon footprint, and at the same time also hold their suppliers accountable to do the same. And so the implication, right, in that instance was the sheer fact that if suppliers didn't necessarily jump on board, ultimately they would be forced out of the broader supply chain. So, I think that the combination play there of both blockchain and AI, was really the enabler to turning that on. And I think the ambition and the hope is that, this won't be the only OEM or industrial client to, apply the same use case and logic to their business. So, that is one for me that stands out.
Well, the one I'm going to refer to, I'm actually going to refer to two that I think are an interesting contrast around the question that companies are legitimately concerned about, which is, so-called hallucination or errors, inaccuracies. And I'm going to just give two examples at both ends of the spectrum. In one case is a conversational experience where truth and facts really didn't matter at all. It was created by 1-800-Flowers for Mother's Day, so that in addition to ordering flowers for your mom, you could get it to generate a limerick or a haiku, a short poem, based on just offering a little bit of information about your mom. So there, of course, that's purely creative. Hallucination is not really a thing. You just want something creative and that's going to be helpful for your mom. At the other end of the spectrum, I would cite highly regulated industries and conversations I've had with, for example, several investment firms where the stakes are pretty high if you give a client the wrong advice. And there, the uses of generative AI that I think are most interesting and promising involve essentially coaching the generative AI bot to behave like you coach your human advisors. So, for example, instead of saying, well, Eric, based on your retirement goals, I recommend that you invest in this fund. That's not a good idea for generative AI to do that because it, might be committing an error. Also, their human advisors are advised against doing that. Instead, what the bot should say is similar to what the human advisor would say, which is, well, Eric, based on your retirement goals, here are 3 funds that are well aligned with those goals, and here are some pros and cons of each one. Which one would you like to learn more about, Eric? So then the bot is not taking responsibility for recommending a particular fund, but is actually doing what Gen AI can be very effective at, based on retrieval augmented generation, for example, and giving useful information that Eric can then take responsibility for actually making a decision about. And I think that's a very creative use of generative AI, which is based on 2 of the things that we've emphasized today. One, having really high quality data, because you need to have good information about those funds, of course, and data from past interactions with humans about those funds, and then steering the bot so that it advises in that way. In the context around the prompt, actually instructing the bot to give advice in that form of presenting options and pros and cons, as opposed to telling the user what to do.
For sure. And maybe just one more example very quickly. David, you sort of prompted this. I've done a lot of work in the loyalty space for many years, good, bad, or otherwise. And I think where I'm encouraged, I wouldn't necessarily say it's an exact use case, but where I'm very encouraged and where I've been working, very experimentally with several brands, is in creating these incredibly rich knowledge graphs that are truly, maybe for the first time in my career, making personalization at scale a reality. So very encouraged early days. I mean, to the point you made, David, like you need data and you need people ultimately to surrender that data to brands, and that trust factor is absolutely real. But
Yep.
but I think that the ability to really know, understand, and delight customers in ways that, frankly, were never possible before. I think I'm super encouraged by that as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great, great. Well, I'm going to sort of go down the list here and throw them at you, gentlemen. If someone knows nothing about integrating AI into their work, where and how can they start?
Well, I mean, Eric, do you want to, shall I
No.
jump in there? Okay. Well, one thing I would say is that, again, going back to what I was just alluding to about error rates and potential hallucination, is it's good to have a feel for how much you can trust the system about and what. Um, in other words, we're tempted as humans to think, well, if I ask a question, it's because I don't know the answer. But if I don't know the answer, I can't really fact check. So I always encourage people when they start using generative AI to ask the bot about something you already know about. For example, your hometown or whatever subject you majored in, or what your profession is. That helps you kind of get a feel for how accurate it is when it goes off the rails. Also, do the experiment of pushing back, contradict it about something where you know it's correct, and notice how it tends to back down a little bit and soft pedal. That's interesting. That gives you a feeling for, a little bit like you would with a new employee. You get very quickly a sense of how confident they are, how reliable they are, and whether maybe sometimes they fib a little bit. You want to get a feeling for that. And that's going to be different from one bot to the next. So I think that's sort of an initial step. But after that, the most valuable uses, and which is why often employee use cases are the first to be applied. The most valuable uses I would compare to the job of a whisperer in the theater. When somebody forgets their lines, the whisperer reminds them of their lines, right? And that can be very helpful. For example, contact center agents who are speaking or live chatting with an end customer, having generative AI suggest solutions. And they have the expertise and the knowledge to decide whether and when a particular answer is going to be helpful or not. So they are ultimately the interface in that situation to the end customer. But generative AI is really helping their productivity and reminding them of things that they might not have thought of otherwise. So again, back to that human in the loop factor. Eric, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the and for me, right, is that I mean, there is tremendous value in generative AI as we've been talking about, and I use it a lot to, I would say, guide my research, but I don't use it as a mechanism to do my research. And the difference is that to kind of surface things that at least are probably more truthful than not in most cases, and using maybe some of the technique, David, that you described to sort of fact check some of that. Super
Yeah.
important, right? But the revealing of various sources and the ability then to continue to dig more deeply into that data, or those topics, super important, right? So don't take the return result in ChatGPT, for example, as gospel, because it's probably not. The other part to that is I think that a lot of times it is garbage in, garbage out. So reprompting and refining your prompts and continuing to drill down on the questions you're asking and the answers you're seeking, I think is also super important, right? So I would just say, broadly speaking, experiment, refine, and I think over time, start to build a bit of a comfort level on how you're using GPT and agents to ultimately benefit your work, maybe
Hmm.
expedite it. But like I said, it's not a replacement by no means. And I think that's also another misnomer that I hear quite often, where it's like, suddenly, no, I don't actually have to do research. I can just ask ChatGPT or some other,
Right.
agent of
Hmm.
choice. That's not how it works by no
Yep.
means. Not
Yeah,
yet.
exactly. Yes, absolutely.
Great answers. This is an interesting one coming in. Do you have any tips to best manage freshness of the data fed into Gen AI? How can we prevent information given to customers that may be irrelevant because it is outdated?
Well, I guess I would say, so it sounds like that's about two things. One is there are kind of two uh, categories of data here. One is the data that's used to train the model, and the other is data that's used to do, for example, retrieval augmented generation. And for the training of the model, you're not going to refresh the model every day. That's a big, training a new model is a big undertaking. So as a result, the data in a model is inherently going to become stale if it's ephemeral kinds of. I mean, if it's long-lasting evergreen data knowledge, then no. But a lot of things are going to be ephemeral and are going to get stale, which is why typically a good strategy is to rely on the model for linguistic fluency and some general knowledge, but actually rely on fine-tuning and on retrieval augmented generation, meaning that you're querying a repository of data that you can refresh, where you can remove what's stale and put in new fresh data, using that to do RAG, and then using generative AI just to summarize those results. So you get the benefits of the linguistic fluidity of generative AI, but the freshness of a repository that you're doing those queries against in real time. So I think if I understood the question correctly, that's what my recommendation would be.
Yeah, no, I think that covers it. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and this is the question that always comes up in AI discussions. There is some fear around AI replacing certain fields, from video editing to accountants. What professions do you think should learn to leverage AI most urgently?
All of the knowledge professions.
So
You know, I
clarify, yes, clarify.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was just reading something interesting recently about robotics that mentioned what's known as Moravec's paradox, which is that it's actually much easier for a machine to beat a grandmaster in chess than it is for a machine to fold a shirt or to clear a table. Um, so, those are embodied in the physical world tasks. Those are the really, really, really hard things for AI to do. So, I think, I guess the reason I mention that is that uh, the, it says something about the kinds of professions that are most vulnerable. They are the professions that are based on knowledge, on doing, summarization, insights extraction, all the things that we're talking about generative AI doing are the
Right.
kinds of things that humans tend to do. Now, uh, generative AI is not, and I don't think anytime soon will replace those humans, but will completely transform those jobs, just as technology has done for ages. I mean, and some people will claim that it's no longer the same work. I'm sure that centuries ago, when painters all had to, in order to paint, they had to mix pigments with linseed oil, and then they had to store it in a pig bladder to keep it stable. And then somebody had the idea of selling paint in a tube. I'm sure some artists said, "Well, you're not a real artist if you don't, mix your own linseed oil and pigment and so on." But it enabled all sorts of innovation in the art world of actually going out into the field and painting in nature and without worrying about the elements as much. It transformed art. And yes, some skills were lost. Artists didn't so much know how to mix linseed oil and pigment, but it also had lots of benefits. And so I think the same is going to be true in the world of designing interfaces, of coming up with business strategy, of doing legal work, accounting work, creative work. It's all going to be impacted, but I don't think eliminated in any way.
No, I mean, the analogy I always draw is it's a now it kind of mimics, if you will, I mean, the web and the internet, right? I mean, you think
Mhm.
about the way we worked 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when the internet was just, effectively coming online in the ways that we know it today.
Mhm.
I would say everyone's world professionally, and even from a consumer point of view, looked and was very different, right?
Yeah.
It's gone through massive swells of evolution, and I'm probably too old these days, to remember what it was like without it. It's it's essentially it's changed the way we work, the way we interface and interact with each other, and I
Yeah.
think AI is going to be no exception. I think the key is going to be trying to understand, right, pragmatically, right, how to apply
Mhm.
it more effectively and advantageously to whatever world it is you're living in.
Mhm.
And I think those innovations will happen, not only happen, but they'll happen very quickly, much more so than we saw with Web 1.0 or 2.0. So
Yep. Definitely.
Great. All right, we're going to end on a positive note here. As we look to the future with the intersection of AI and customer experience, what are you most excited about or keeping your pulse on to see how it unfolds? So, what are those kind of connections between AI and customer experience that incite you all both the most?
I mean, for me, I alluded to it earlier. It's really the ability to truly understand customer intent in real time, and frankly deliver an experience around it that is truly bespoke and personalized. I think, at least where we are in time, as I've said, the idea of personalization at scale has been a thing and around for many, many years. It's been, I would say, it's greatly fallen short of its promise, in a sense. I think for the first time, we're starting to see some real applications there that are, eye-popping and eye-opening. And I think, the ability to even assist agents, for example, as David alluded to earlier, in call centers, and being able to actually solve real problems without having, I mean, I know this sounds kind of simple, but without having to, reprompt the customer for their social security number and their date of birth, and their, having all of that information right there in front of them where they can actually solve a problem, or even through automation, solve it for them, anticipate their needs, and continue to delight customers. That's where I really see the power of AI. But coupled with great design and human centered design that truly understands customer intent. Again, I don't think we're at a place where automagic just happens. I think it still requires people to think and design and do and monitor and optimize, but the technologies are certainly accelerating a lot of the experiences that we're able to deliver these days in much greater form.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think one of the most exciting things is that yeah, AI will be able to automate some of the more tedious things so that the actual connections that are from human to human will be more valuable. They won't be about the tedious things like resetting my password and so on. And then conversely, I think there are other areas where generative AI will make a difference in enabling, greater innovation and creativity. Kind of going back to what you mentioned, Eric, about, the red ocean scenario. Well, how do we move beyond the red ocean where people are actually not just thinking of new ways to do old things, but new ways to do new things. And I think eventually we'll get there with generative AI, and there will really be new things that we aren't really thinking about today. In the same way that in the early days of people using smartphones, they thought of them as like, well, this is a way I can check email and browse the web while I'm on the go, as opposed to, oh, maybe I could order a ride to get across town, or I could make a reservation at a restaurant, and some of the more innovative things that have happened since then. So I think that's going to be the excitement. In some ways, those connections that are actually between humans being more effective, and at the same time, great innovation being enabled at the same time.
Great. All right, I'm going to throw in one just from me that I'd like to know. So it's next year, same date, same time. What's going to be different when we wake up?
Well, my quick answer to that is that I think there will be, on the one hand, a reality check, because a lot of things will have gone wrong clearly in the uses of generative AI that people have done irresponsibly.
Right.
But at the same time, uh, there will be some amazing developments in the same way that there have been just over the past, well, just over 2 years. It was, 2 years and 6 days ago that ChatGPT came out, and a lot has changed since then. So a lot of acceleration, and some bumps in the road too. So don't be one of the companies that is stumbling and hitting those bumps in the road.
I agree, and I also, again, I go back to the pace and speed by which we're moving. I think that I'm actually curious, maybe even 3 6 months from now. It's not even a matter of where we are in a year. I think you're going to continue to see the pace of innovation happen at breakneck speed. And as someone who follows a lot of the startups and a lot of the companies who are playing quite deeply in this space, I know I'm personally encouraged by a lot of the things that they're doing, if you will, behind the scenes. So I'm excited about ultimately what's going to come online and come to market in the next 12 months. And stay tuned. Maybe we get ourselves back together next year and we do a little bit of a retrospective. It'd be fun to do that.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. Well, there are more questions coming in, but I'm afraid we're out of time. So I want to kind of put a wrap on this. Eric and David, I don't know if you'd like to make any closing remarks, but I want to also just reassure everyone that get back to us. We will answer your questions. Reach out to us at iCrossing.com, or please email us at hello@iCrossing.com, and we'll be happy to continue the dialogue. But I'll kind of turn it over to you all to see if there's anything you'd like to say and close us out on a positive note.
No, I mean, for me, David, I just wanted to, offer a sincere thank you for your time and, the very enjoyable conversation. I enjoyed every minute of it. So, sincerely, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. I think this is a really important topic. And, it's so difficult, I think, for people to understand that there's more of a responsibility than usual for people, including business people, to really understand the principles behind the way generative AI works, be able to make it responsible use of it in a way that benefits their customers and their business. So pleasure to join you today.
Thanks again. And thank you everyone too for joining us today. I hope you found the discussion as valuable as I did. And as you really move forward in navigating this evolving landscape. So thank you again. And until next time, again, reach out if you have continued questions or if you want to talk more about the topic. I think Lori mentioned the email address at hello@iCrossing.com. So look forward to hearing from folks.